What's up, guys? This is Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall markets. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link that's down below or use my QR code right here to sign up. If you sign up for Moomoo with the link down below and deposit $100, you're going to get $20 of free Nvidia stock. If you deposit $2,000, you're going to get $50 worth of Nvidia. Deposits $10,000 to get $300 worth of the stock, or deposit $50,000 to get $1,000 of free Nvidia stock. You're also going to qualify for a 3.6% APY base rates plus a 4.5% APY extra for 3 months, making it a total of an 8.1% APY. The offer ends very soon, so please use my link down below to sign up. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the overall stock market. So I just want to mention that we got some negative news that came out this morning that caused the market to sell off again. And now it looks like SPY is forming a flag, but there's no sign of a big breakout or a bounce quite yet. And I do think that we might try to push a little higher tomorrow morning, but there is a risk of us rejecting off this trend line again, because I still think that there is a risk of us testing this 200 EMA down here now. And that could be where we end up going before we get a much larger bounce. So let's break down what's happening with the news, and I'll talk about the charts in the next couple of minutes. First and foremost, right now, Tesla's shareholder meeting is going on. Elon Musk is answering lots of questions about Tesla, talking about their products. And there is some good news for Tesla investors. Right now, the shareholders have approved Elon Musk's historic pay package, which is going to incentivize him to stay at the company. That's a good piece of news, at least for Tesla. And that is, once again, why the share price bounced a bit. I do think that much of this news is priced in, though. So we'll see how Tesla reacts tomorrow. But overall, this is more positive. On top of this, tomorrow is going to be Friday, November 7th, 2025. We have Williams and Jefferson from the Fed giving speeches. Then we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment data coming out at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So look for some volatility 30 minutes after the stock market opens. That's going to be important, so look for some volatility then. Now, why did the market sell off today? Well, there is some negative data coming out. So even though initial jobless claims was not coming out because of the government shutdown, we did see a report from this coming out from the Chicago Fed instead. So the Fed is still functioning, and they decided to report this data. And they have announced that the US jobless rate edged up in October to the highest level we've seen in 4 years, which is not the best of news, at least for the economy. They're also looking at the unemployment rate, which climbed to 4.36% last month, which is about 4.4% when rounded up, based off the data that comes out. So the Chicago Fed is telling us that the data is not looking that great for the labor market, and we're looking for big increases in jobless claims, and we're at a 4.4% rate right now. We're very close to that. Not the best of news, because it tells us that the Fed is in a position where they're easing up on policy because the economy is taking a hit and unemployment is continuing to go up. So we're seeing a lot of weakness in the labor market, which is what we heard from many other Fed officials, such as Lisa Cook and many others. And they are once again incentivizing that the Fed is going to be more, I would say, lenient than before, and they have to ease up more. We also had the Fed governor come out. Myron says he's expecting the U.S. central banks to cut interest rates in December. He thinks there's a very good chance of that happening. And he mentioned in the past that if they don't do this, it's going to be more negative, and there's going to be a risk of more pain coming to the economy if they don't start to ease up now. He also implied that the Fed is behind the curve and they have a lot of catching up to do. On top of this, President Trump's tariffs are being reviewed by the Supreme Court, and nothing is confirmed yet, but as of right now, it looks like many of the judges are skeptical of the tariffs and the legality of it. Could this lead to President Trump having to undo his tariffs, and will that lead to lots of refunds to be collected by businesses? We don't know for sure, but it's a possibility, and if that does happen, that could be more bullish for the markets. We'll see, just to be safe. On top of this, if that ends up happening, President Trump made an announcement that that if the tariffs are basically rejected, it's going to be devastating for our country, according to President Trump. And then he said he has to develop a new game plan. He said there's going to be game two plan, essentially, and then we'll see what happens. So he did say that that is basically what his move is going to be, and we are yet to see what he specifically means by that. So that's very important. The last thing I want to talk about is this: the government shutdown is on day 37, unfortunately. It's very hard for everyday Americans to see this going on. And right now, I think there's a big vote going on from the Senate, and we're going to see if that changes things or not. So be patient, and we'll see when this government shutdown finally comes to an end. And it's very important for us to be very strong during these times. There's not really much else coming out in terms of news and data. Very minor earnings data, at least for tomorrow. So we'll see what that leads to. Looking at the SPY chart, we're on this downtrend now. We have like a channel where we like to bounce off the lower trend line, and then we like to reject off the upper one. So we're going to see if we bounce from here or not for a temporary move up towards that 675 area before potentially dipping lower. I would not be surprised if we touch this 200 EMA down here, which could be where we end up bottoming to look for a bigger bounce, forming a nice flag and a nice position for, once again, lots of Wall Street investors to take longs for a nice bounce. So that's my prediction essentially for tomorrow. If we break past 678, we could turn more bullish. But if we lose 666 or 664, it's going to be more bearish. I do think that we might try to pop in the morning for 675, and then we could be looking for another move down like this before this continues to base. And I would not rule out the possibility of 666 to 664 before the market tries to see a much larger bounce. On the QQQ, we're also on a downtrend right now. We have support down here at the low 600s, and we have resistance to watch for at this 620 area. We're at support here, so we're going to see if we bounce a little bit back up towards like 617 to 620, and then we're going to see if we turn lower to start continuing to fall back down towards our 200 EMAs, and then we could be looking for a big bounce just like that. So watch that very, very closely. On the IWM, we're also showing some weakness. We got a big rejection and we're barely holding 440. So I do think that even if we bounce a bit tomorrow, it's going to be followed by more downside because I think we might be filling this gap back down to 237. Then we'll see what happens after that. But keep in mind, there is some downside risk. ES is also forming an inverse cup and handle, and we're looking a bit more bearish right now. We have this resistance around 67, 67, and our support down here is going to be around that 6,700 flat area. So like right here, we have this support. And then we're going to see if we bounce off this or not. So watch that very closely. On NQ, we're also showing some weakness. We're forming an inverse cup and handle. We could be dipping back down towards 25,000 flats, and then we'll see if we bounce or not off that area. For now, we're favoring downside, and I think that we're going to be looking to see if we bounce through 25,000. Might be a little bit more downside on NQ looking at the current trend. Bitcoin bounced, now it's rejecting as I'm speaking, so we're going to see if 100,000 holds. If not, we could be dipping towards 98,000, and we'll see if we bounce off that level or not. On Tesla, we're showing weakness again because I called out the possibility of a left shoulder, a head, and a right shoulder. Tesla pumped after the announcement came out that shareholders approved Elon Musk's pay package, but then the share price is rejecting, favoring a move back down towards 440. If that doesn't hold, we may continue to fall down all the way down towards 420. So be very careful because Tesla has a left shoulder, head, and right shoulder, and we're rejecting right now. Might be dipping for like 435 again, then eventually to the lower 420s. So be careful with Tesla. Now, Nvda is looking very healthy. It was due to sell off a bit. Keep in mind on the daily time frame, we're coming down to fill these gaps. There's one more gap left at 182. So we might be rebounding in the morning and continuing to fall to fill some of these gaps. And then once we form a bottom near 180, we could be looking for a monstrous bounce. There's another giant gap back around 208, so we will eventually return up there. But for now, there's some downside risk. Apple is kind of flat right now. It pumped today only to dump. So I'm looking at a head and shoulders like pattern. We could be retesting 266. And we'll see if we hold. If not, we could be dipping more. I'm going to go over just a couple more for this video. Netflix is rejecting. Could be retesting 1080, but it's consolidating overall. So there might be a small dip before it tries to bounce. Palantir showing some weakness back down towards 170. We'll see if we bounce. On AMD, we're making lower highs here. So we could be tipping back down towards this 232 area, and we'll see if this holds or not. Coinbase is on a bit of a downtrend. We could be continuing to fall. Might retest 300 before it continues to dip, but overall, this might be a nice buying opportunity because Coinbase is down huge compared to where it used to be. Also, we're a little bit below our 200 EMA, so I'm going to be watching this right here. This resistance becoming support around 280 could be tested if we continue to hold below 300. I do think we retest 300. We'll see if we reject. On Amazon, we're showing some weakness. We're starting to dip right here. Could be retesting like 240, which is where we have resistance becoming support. And we'll see if we bounce near there. If not, to look for a little bit more downside. Meta pumped and then dumped. We came short of our 20 EMA. Now we're falling. May continue to fall to the lower 600s. 610 could be tested and eventually 600. Google pumped and dumped. It could be retesting 282. And then Microsoft is on the downtrend, but we have to see if we could reclaim 500 or not. If not, we're looking for 495. Last but not least, the VIX. It has this inverse head and shoulders like pattern. This could be signifying more upside for the VIX, which in unison would likely imply that there could be more downside potential for the markets overall in terms of our trend. But like I said before, I presume this is going to be temporary. It's not going to be a very, very long term thing, just a short term dip in the markets, setting us up for a very, very big squeeze to finish off the year because of the Fed easing up on policy. They're going to be buying back many treasury bonds, and they do have to continue to reduce interest rates, most likely, looking at unemployment. I think that's the most likely possibility. And simultaneously, the government shutdown will come to an end soon. I don't know exactly when it's going to be, but I do believe eventually the government has to come back. They have to eventually pass some kind of funding bill. Whether it takes like 1 week or 2 weeks from now, it's going to eventually happen. And all those things will be more bullish for the market once they finally come. Yes, the market is bearish for now because of the uncertainty. And yes, we may continue to fall a bit lower in terms of this trend. Even if we bounce a bit on SPY and the QQQ tomorrow before continuing to fall, we will eventually form a bottom and see a big squeeze to finish off the month and the year, in my opinion. Just be patient, guys. Watch for a small bounce tomorrow morning before we continue to fall, and then we're going to be looking for a bottom very soon. Thank you for listening, guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow, and peace out.